Hi, I'm Aluk Edwardson. I'm the cultural educator, artist, mother, and Arctic person who put this cultural learning resource together. If you'd like to learn more about who I am and the work that I do, please visit www.creativedecolonization.org. This is the organization that I founded to support arts and cultural wellness on Indigenous lands. This cultural learning resource is going to dive into the work of William Qquilluq, who wrote the People of Kauwerak, Legends of the Northern Eskimo, with the assistance of Laurel Bland. William Qquilluq was told old stories from his grandfather, who he lived with as a young child. He was born in 1869 in Iñupiat, or Point Hope, and moved back to Qquilluq when he was 7. Qquilluq was a village in the central island area of the Seward Peninsula and is where his parents and grandparents were from. William Qquilluq died in 1972. You will find a country beyond that mountain. Take one of your men with you and go investigate it. You will like it. On your way, the power of wisdom will be with you, and you will be amazed at the things you will see every step you take. You will become an expert person about the changed way of living. You will find different and new resources to bring your people that they will use. So this entire journey is about learning new things and bringing them back. You will learn how to help others with their problems from the things you will see and learn on the journey. All the thinking you will do will come in the form of imagination. It will help you to find new ways to live and to make those ways useful by thinking about things in images. You must use your imagination always. You must make it begin to work and to picture things for you. It will make your journey easier for you. I want to stop here for a minute to talk about how words, imagination, and images are all connected, and how envisioning something to be able to create it is often the first step in the creative process, is to think about its structure, how it might possibly look like in the end. Not that it often does with that first imagining, but that first imagining is often what gets us going in developing. I will give you wisdom, and your people will honor you because you are wise. Your wisdom will lead you into great honor from your generation and the generations to come through centuries. Those were the last words the prophet spoke. He disappeared. This was the last time the prophet Iñupiat was with the Qquilluq. Now he must carry on alone. He must try to obey the instructions from the prophet. He must become a servant to his people as well as a leader. He must begin to learn how to advise and lead his people. He must learn the new ways by observing the animals and birds. He must use his power of imagination to see how the people can find food and keep warm in the hard, cold days to come. He must use his wisdom to make his journey and then return to help his people. Soon after Qquilluq's last talk with Iñupiat, the words of the prophet began to come true. The sun was very warm one fine morning. Many different birds were singing in the trees. The moon was sailing before the sun, but the sun was not very far behind. Everything was the same as ever for the people. They were enjoying themselves and the children were playing. Qquilluq looked up and saw the sun was almost touching the moon. Later he looked up again. The sun touched the moon. It seemed the sun was going behind the moon. Soon every person around was watching. They waited to see what was going to happen. They even began to ask Qquilluq, "Why is the sun so close to the moon?" Qquilluq told them they had better prepare for the change coming to the land. There were some who did not seem to believe him. Others with Qquilluq moved near a great cave close by the place they were staying. These are the only ones that survived when the disaster came. When the people woke up on the fourth day and came out of the cave to find frost on the ground, they were still naked, like before the disaster. They were so very cold. Qquilluq went to work in his head, using the power of imagination. He saw in his mind how the clothes of people should be. He saw how arms and legs should be covered too. Qquilluq went into the trees and found a big piece of wood. When he found one the right size for a man, he worked and cut it until it looked like his own shape. He looked at it for a long time. He tried to see in his imagination the best way to cover it so he could keep warm and still move around. He decided it most likely would take 2 pieces for a body cover. These would have to be made from hides of the animals. This meant they would have to be fastened together some way because the animal skins were not the right shape for a man. He thought about how skins could be held together. So this is a really important point here, using the power of imagination. I teach creative writing and other art forms, and I always tell my students that, inspiration starts in your heart and your head. You have to have that inspiration, you have to have that vision, you have to use the power of imagination to see what it is you want to create. And that's exactly what Qquilluq was doing here. Qquilluq went out into the countryside with many problems to think about, heavy in his mind. This was because the world itself was changing. He thought about how his people must face this new climate without ever having known any way of living except the time when the country was warm. Qquilluq found a dry place and sat down in the dead grass. It was a good place for thinking, he decided. He looked down beyond his foot. He saw many ants. They were busy, and it seemed they were building something. He bent forward to get a close look. He watched them. He saw one go into the ground carrying a short grass into a hole. Other ants went into that hole, all carrying short grasses. When they came out, they had nothing to carry. He looked into that hole. He saw those ants were working in the hole down in the ground. He could see a pile of dirt in front of that hole that they had hauled out from under the ground. They had replaced some of the dirt with dry grass to keep the cold weather out of the empty space. Now, Qquilluq was thinking, they are very small, yet they build a place to live and keep warm. We people are big and strong. Why, we could build a home, a warm place to keep us out from the cold like the ants do. These ants found a dry place to build their home. Qquilluq went back to the cave and told the other men about what he had seen. We must look for a dry place to build the dugout houses. We must help each other so we can all have a home. Another great example of biomimicry, inspiration from nature, and then applied technological and engineering way. That's the mindset that Qquilluq had when he was bending down and looking at the ants. He was looking at the construction, which is why he pointed out the dry grass to keep cold weather out from the empty space, which is something that was adapted for Qquilluq's, the dugout houses or sod houses. They have a place in the entry, a long entryway tunnel that often does have a flap to keep out cold air. People began to pick the green leaves of different plants they liked to eat. They put them in a pouch of skin to save them for winter time. The first short, cold season, they did not realize any of the problems until too late to prepare for winter season. By the next warm season, they learned. That summertime, women folk gathered plants and berries, dried fish, and gathered some wood with a stone axe. They also learned to dry meat from the animals. They picked and stored blueberries, blackberries, cranberries, and salmon berries for winter use. They had found out that they could not live without greens and berries in wintertime. They had already tried it, and it was not good. The ancient people knew that they needed fruits and veggies. They needed greens and veggies even in the wintertime, and they planned for that. So our diet is different in the Arctic, but it's balanced If you eat seasonally and you store, just like our ancestors did, you can eat year-round from the food of any land if you're open to exploring new and different ways of eating that food. It will get colder and colder each cold time that comes. It will be harder to live, to stay warm, and to find food. Iñupiat told of a land beyond the mountain in the east, where there is plenty for us to use even in cold times. Let all of us look forward to finding an easier and better living for ourselves and the generations to come after us. This is the beginning of a change for our people. We must all help each other. At the quarterly moon, it was time for Qquilluq and his companion, Silamu, to start from this home country to the destination. His way was through a land of no men, straight east toward the mountain, far away in the distance. Every step they moved ahead toward their destination, they investigated every place they came to. Everything they saw was new. It was important to go through all the different parts of the land. They found many new plants, birds, animals, rocks, minerals, and growing things that they did not know about. They did not know if they were useful or not. They looked at everything and experimented with what they found. They enjoyed everything they made, from ideas that came to use natural things. They figured out how to work with the natural things they found with the help of the power of imagination. Whenever an idea came up, they talked about it to each other and then they tried it out. Together they would experiment with an idea until it worked right. One would say something will work a certain way, the other would say it could work another way. Then they would plan how to try both ways and find out. This is how they worked together. They found it was easier to do things together. Each time the things they made and the ideas they tried got better and better, until they found the best method and they both agreed this was the one to use. Their brains were always working now. Sooner or later, after one man had thought out a new idea or plan, he would talk it over with the other. Then they both worked on it, no matter what the idea was. They were both learning many things they never knew before. I absolutely love this information. It's really in line with what I know from Iñupiat culture and history. It's very egalitarian. Some Iñupiat tribes had chiefs, others didn't. A lot of them just had umeliks, which were whaling captains as well as leaders. Sometimes they served as judges, things like that. And so I really appreciate this because even though, of course, there were respected leaders, there's no ego in this. There's no, Qquilluq wasn't saying it has to be my idea because I was the one that heard it from the prophet. Silamu is listening and contributing as well. It's very collaborative, and that's something that I really appreciate seeing here in our ancient texts. Finally, they came to the land of the big mountain. The men climbed all the way to the top of the great mountain. Finally, they stopped to rest. They sat down on some warm rocks. They could see all of the new country spread out below the mountain. It was like a great bowl with a very wide bottom. They saw many lakes. 3 or 4 big rivers flowed into the basin. All of the rivers flowed into a big lake. The big mountain Iñupiat told Qquilluq to find was on the south side of the lake and stood up from east to west. Qquilluq pointed down the mountainside. "Look," he said. Silamu turned his eyes to the place Qquilluq pointed to and saw a great herd of caribou feeding around. Some of them were laying down. Silamu smiled. "I have never seen so many caribou in my life," he said. A few days later, Qquilluq and Silamu started down the river in the Iñupiat. They planned to go down the river across the big lake they saw from the mountain and follow a river to the ocean. They would use the sun to guide them back to their people. Their journey would be a long trip. They wanted to do this for their people, not for themselves. Those two men were the first explorers to go into the land of no men to find out things to help their people. They had found a good place for successful hunting with lots of fish, animals, birds, trees, and plants. Still, those men had something more to explore. Ahead of them on their journey back to their people were places they had not seen. Their plan to travel by boat was not easy. It was a new experience for them. The men started off again on their journey to where their people lived. Finally, they came to a river they saw they must follow to get to their people. Those Inuit of ancient times were sure surprised when they saw Qquilluq and Seelemiu come back to the place they were staying. One day after the ice left, it was real calm weather. Very early in the morning, there was not a breath of wind. The people started off with Qquilluq and Seelemiu leading all of the boats. The boats were being pulled along the shore by 3 or 4 men to each boat. Late in the evening, they camped and rested. It took them 8 days to get to the big lake that Qquilluq and Seelemiu promised them they would see. This lake was the start of their journey into the better land near the Great Mountain. Here, the Inuit people would find a better life for many generations to come. The people of Qquilluq and Seelemiu were not sorry they had moved. New generations came and the people settled in many places on the lands around the big mountain. They remembered the first disaster and told their children the stories of Qquilluq and Seelemiu.